Hello and welcome to this bonus interview, an exclusive for you Audible listeners. You can get this audiobook in many different places, but if you're on Audible, you will receive this bonus interview of when I am here talking about Jesus the Troublemaker, his last 8 days with the author himself, Andy Rowland. Thank you for doing this interview with me.
A pleasure. It's a great pleasure.
So obviously an author of 8 books.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly writing, constantly got new ideas, which we absolutely love. Jesus, the Troublemaker, slightly different from your other books?
Yes, it is. It's a novel.
And your first novel?
Yes.
Yeah, so let's just go straight in there. So why did you write a novel?
I'll tell you.
Out of all your other titles?
Exactly, I'll tell you. I was thinking of doing a kind of devotional companion to Holy Week using principally the Gospel of Mark. And I was sort of making notes in a notebook in the car while we drove back from Plymouth. Linda was driving, my wife. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, thought popped in my head. It was hot in the Jordan Valley. I thought, hello, that sounds like the beginning of a novel. Maybe I better write a novel. So on Thursday, I was in the local pub and the Courtfield with a pint of Guinness. Starting to write the first page or so, and thought popped in my head, the Troublemaker. Oh, that's what it's called. And very appropriate, because that's exactly what Jesus was. And the church and Christians don't get it because they ignore one verse in the Gospel of Mark in chapter 11. You know that when Jesus, well, first of all, he went into the temple and had a look around. And as it was late, went to Bethany with the 12. Do you know why he was late?
Tell me.
He'd only just walked 18 miles uphill from Jericho. If he left at 6, he'd got to Bethany at 3. There were no Greyhound buses then. Anyway, the following day, he came into the temple. He threw over the tables of the money chambers. We all know that. Or many people know that, particularly look at the El Greco picture. What nobody picks up is the next verse. He would not allow anyone to carry trade goods through the temple or his vessels. Not anything, as in an NRSV, it's wrong translation. It's often is, anyway. Now, the temple had the only eastern gateway to Jerusalem. If you were in the upper city and you wanted to go east or take anything east, you would go through the temple. Rather than taking a detour up north, round by the Roman Antonia fortress, or take a long detour down south through the water gate or the fountain gate. So what Jesus did is he stopped the traffic. Now, this is where you have to use common sense. How do you stop the traffic? Think Extinction Rebellion. The only way they're going to stop the traffic is by having enough of his Galilean supporters at each of the gateways to outnumber the temple police with their truncheons, saying to people, you're not bringing it out here, are you, sunshine? So it wasn't a demonstration. It was an occupation, which continued. The following day, chief priests say, what's your authority for doing this? Not having done this. And Jesus wasn't a kind of a woolly-minded liberal saying, I'm just sorry, I had a bad hair day yesterday, guys. So I'm sure that for the whole of that Passover week, Jesus was the man in control of the outer court, doing his teaching in Solomon's portico, directly opposite the temple itself, where the priests were. An absolute challenge to their authority.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. It is a wow, isn't it?
It is a wow.
Suddenly.
It is a wow, actually, because this is something that's popping up a lot recently about those very verses. And it's quite funny, actually, because that you just popped something else in my mind there to think and just piece it all together. It's something I've been personally thinking about. So thank you for that. I'm sure it's getting everyone else thinking as well who's listening to this, going, never really thought about it like that. Wonderful. So, okay, so you're writing your first novel. And did you have any problems? Did any problems arise when you were writing this?
None that Wikipedia couldn't solve. I mean, thank God for the internet.
Yes.
So, for instance, when he's walking, I have to do have one section in which Jesus is walking up from Jericho to Jerusalem. What was the road to Jericho, from Jericho to Jerusalem road like? Well, go to the internet, you'll find out. Find it, there was no villages, no water. There was one Roman fort, where a particularly dangerous bit of the road. Very interesting.
So basically, the only kind of issues that you sort of stumbled across, well, it was more sort of like the research to create the novel itself. Is that right?
Well, the joy was, first of all, making everything Jewish. So Jesus is Yeshua throughout. Simon Peter is Shimon Kepha throughout. Jerusalem is Yerushalayim throughout. That's very straightforward to do. Then I had to polish up the words of Jesus, if you like. So Jesus says to the disciples, or to Peter, Satan has demanded to have you destroyed or something. And Satan has wanted to put you through the shredder, for instance. So it was great fun, rethinking the words of Jesus so they were actually modern, and also making up things like the various witnesses at the trial. I had my favourite is Toll, an alcoholic who is absolutely a hopeless witness for Caiaphas.
Did you learn anything yourself whilst going through this process?
Yes. I mean, what it has done, it has made Jesus, the real Jesus, the sort of the person who I relate to, the person who my faith is based on. And the real Jesus is much more challenging than sacred ideas of Jesus. And the other thing is I had to take very much more seriously the return of Jesus, or second coming, large, what do you call it? Because I never gave that much house room. However, I have to say, was in Jesus' mind. It was a central thing which pushed him forward. And more recently, in fact, just, this last week in Holy Week, talking about Jesus and God in Gethsemane, praying, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. He could have done that so easily. The only reason they were in Gethsemane is to wait for Judas, because their assembly point. Who was not there? Judas. He was waiting for Judas, and he knew what was going to happen. So, the nails went into Jesus, not at the cross, but in Gethsemane, nailing him to the spot.
I have never heard anyone phrase it like that before. Yeah. Wow, that's a really powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah. But he could just walked out.
Yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. Yeah, quite. So, did you have any favourite moments within the book where, apart from the trial, for example, where you thought, I enjoy this bit, or because obviously you're writing a novel, aren't you? I mean, you're going through all these different kind of feelings, right?
Now, what happened? What to do with the resurrection? I can't write it as a continuing novel. It wouldn't work at all that. So I wrote it as a letter. Okay, it has to be a letter. Well, who's going to write it? Well, one of the women, obviously, who was there, Salome. Who would she write to? Well, she'd write to her husband. Why is she writing to her husband? Well, her husband must be away. Why would he be away? Well, maybe he was escorting Lazarus to Ephraim because maybe they thought Lazarus was also in danger. And going to the same town that Jesus took refuge in after the raising of Lazarus, which is Ephraim's, John chapter 11, where I've been. It's now called of Tabeh, which is a Christian town in the West Bank, they say. So that had great fun writing that and saying, okay, well, after Sabbath's over, which was sunset, we went to the buy the spices, where the merchants would have their sort of early evening shops open, and getting a very bad reception when they were told they were doing it for Jesus. He wasn't popular at all in Jerusalem, people at all. So that was all kind of exciting stuff to write.
Yes, it sounds it. It does sound it. It's a novel, but I'm assuming, like with your books, there is a message within there. Is there a message, something you wanted to leave people with?
Take the real Yeshua seriously.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
But also, I have to say that after each section, there's some notes saying why I wrote it, what were the decisions I had to make, so the readers can decide for themselves if it stacks up.
Yeah. So also, so it seems like you're inviting people to look slightly at a different angle and go on that journey themselves and make their own mind up. Would you say that's right?
I have a friend, Sister Hilda Mary, who her comment was, well, I've had my whole, this has changed my view of Holy Week, and a new, much fresher story has taken its place. I want to feed people's imagination. So they say, where would I have been? What would I have done?
Well, you're adding acknowledgement and in many ways developing your own personal relationship with Jesus in doing so.
Yep.
Okay. So I've got another question for you before we wrap it up, but it's sort of a twofold, really. One is, would you write another novel?
Yes.
Is this, you would?
Yes.
Is there one on the horizon?
I know what I'd like to write.
You know what you'd like to write. So
I know the title.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you hold that for now. However, what I would love for you to let us all know, for our Audible listeners here, what's your next book?
My next book is going to be The Church Has a Past, Has It Got a Future? By which I mean, has it got a future in a public square? There's nothing to stop the church from having a small sect like Church of Latter-day Saints. We have lost our conversation in the public square. Is it possible for us to rethink our faith in a way that gets it back?
Interesting. Why do you think we've lost the voice in the public square, as you just said?
It's been going a long time. Since the 18th century. Slowly driven away. But what's happened is that my book has three sections. The first is the last 2,000 years, in which I ask, what was society asking? Well, not what the church was saying, but what was society asking? So, for instance, we know what the Jews of Jesus' time were asking, because he was asked it twice. What must I do to inherit eternal life? It's not what the Greeks were asking. They're asking a completely different question. 1 Corinthians 11. So that goes through the whole of history. When I came to the year 2000, I thought, actually, I'm not sure society is asking anything at all. So my next section was to describe every single change of the first 20 years of this century. Social media, graphene, space exploration, gender stuff, social media,
And
video
when-
games,
And when
etc.
do you think this book may be coming out?
I'm at the point of approaching publishers now.
Okay,
So-
fantastic.
Be nice by the end of this year.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I just, I'll pray on that. I wish you the very, very best. I think it sounds terrific. I'm very, very interested in your next book as well, as I'm sure everyone listening will be as well. Andy, thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
Thanks very much for having me.